Ambassador, come in, Ambassador. This thing never works.
Oh. CSS has a handful of new text properties for handling text overflow, line wrapping, and word breaks, even rendering text shadows. In this video, we'll learn how to use these exciting text properties to enhance the layout and appearance of our text. In our HTML document, we have an H1 element, and we'll be adding shadow effects to this heading in the style.css file, where I've already created a few rules just to get us started. The text shadow property is used to create drop shadows for text. It accepts 3 unit values followed by a color. The first number indicates the horizontal offset, or how far to the left or right the shadow should fall. The second value indicates the vertical offset, or distance to the top or bottom. The third is an optional value, which specifies the amount of blur or blur radius applied to the drop shadow. And the fourth value is the color. The color value can be any of the keyword values, hex values, also RGBA or HSLA. The first 2 offset values can also be negative numbers. So here we've specified that the shadow will be 1 pixel to the right of the text and 1 pixel down with a blur radius of 4 pixels. And the color of the shadow will be black. So we'll refresh the browser and see that the text shadow is now applied to the heading. In our style sheet, if we make the offset values a negative number, notice how the shadow is reversed. It's now positioned 1 pixel to the left and 1 pixel above the text. So let's go ahead and try another color using a blue RGB value. We'll also add an alpha value with RGBA to reduce the opacity of the text shadow to 80% with a value of 0.8. I'll also increase the blur radius to 8 pixels. When we refresh the page, we see the subtle blue drop shadow applied to the heading. We can also apply multiple shadows to the same text by separating each shadow value with a comma. When rendered, the shadows are stacked one on top of the other, and the first one declared will be the shadow on top or closest to the text. When we refresh the page, notice how the shadows stacked behind the text create a soft, beveled-like effect. And if I lighten the text color, we can clearly see how the shadows are stacked behind the text. In an upcoming video, we'll learn other useful techniques and more effects we can create using the text shadow property. Next, we'll switch over to a new document containing 2 paragraphs. The top one has a class attribute of text overflow, and the bottom has a class of word wrap. In the browser, we can see that the text is overflowing the containing paragraph elements. The reason this is happening in the top paragraph is because the white space for the text has been set to no wrap, which ignores line breaks and collapses all spaces to a single line of text. With the text overflow property, we can specify what should happen when text overflows its containing element. Sometimes we may need to hide or clip text that doesn't quite fit in its containing box, or is in a constrained space, like our top paragraph here. If that happens, we need a way to let the user know with some sort of visual hint that the text isn't complete and that it has been clipped. The text overflow property alone does not force an overflow to occur. For this to happen, the containing element needs to have an overflow property applied with a value other than visible. So for our paragraph with the class text overflow, we'll need to add an overflow property with a value of hidden. Now, overflow hidden does hide the extra text, but it's still difficult for the user to notice that the text has been hidden, since there is no visual indication of it. In the text overflow property, the value clip is the default value, which is what we're seeing here. Clip clips the viewable content by truncating the text at the point where it overflows. But again, we still need a visual hint to indicate that the text does not end here. To do that, we'll use the ellipsis value. If the content overflows, it will render an ellipsis character to represent the clipped text, and it replaces however many characters are necessary for the ellipsis to fit. So when we refresh, we see the ellipsis appended to the text and is in the visibly rendered content area. At the time of this recording, Opera 9 and 10 still require the vendor prefix for this property. Next up, the word wrap property gives us a simple way of wrapping text within a single word. It allows long and unbreakable words or links to break and wrap onto the next line. So in the second paragraph here, with the class word wrap, we have a long and continuous link that, like the previous example, has no breakpoints and is breaking out of its containing paragraph. To break the link at the point where it begins to overflow, all we need to do is add the word wrap property and the value break word. As you can see, the browser breaks the link and accommodates it nicely within the paragraph. In the next video, we'll learn how we can style HTML lists with properties specifically used to control the shape, type, and positions of list items.